Welcome back. This is Ryan, and I wanted to share this episode with you. I was a guest on Pipeliner's podcast, and one of the things that I actually was asked is something that's constantly asked to me in private, and that is, where is the future of works going? How do you automate your work? And then how do you leverage it to scale sales and marketing? And so I get deep into those concepts today in this episode, and I think you'll really enjoy it because, like I said, this is one of the things that I always get asked in private. So I wanted to share it with you and hope you enjoy the show.
All right. Hello and welcome to another AI Sales Insider series where we talk about AI. My name is John Golden from Sales Pop Online Sales Magazine and Pipeliner CRM, joining you as usual from actually a very wet and rainy San Diego. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Jonathan Mast, who is in Alabama. How are you doing, Jonathan?
Doing well, thanks.
Yeah, and Jonathan's 25 years in the trenches of business, watching the digital landscape transform. But for the last 2 years, he has been in AI, and he sees AI as a game-changing, not a tool, but a weapon for entrepreneurs. And now he's made it his mission to help business owners with prompting strategies and turning complexity into opportunity. And I'm also joined by Ryan Staley, who is in the Chicagoland area. How you doing, Ryan?
Good to see you. Good to see you, man.
Yeah, and Ryan's the founder and CEO of Whale Boss, where he helps technology founders grow from 1 million to 30 million through principles he used to achieve the same results personally. And so what we're going to talk about today is how AI is transforming sales workflows and improving efficiency and optimizing processes. Now, please, if you have questions, put them in the chat and we'll try and get to them. Or just say hello and let us know where you're joining from, which is always fun too. So let's start off with the kind of general set the scene question, gentlemen. I mean, how has AI just on a general level impacted sales teams and how sales teams operate in comparison to how they were operating like 6 months ago, a year ago, 2 years ago? Maybe Jonathan, if you want to kick that off.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I think, for what we're seeing across the board, both in our company and for companies we work with, is that it's giving sales teams the ability to respond faster and respond in kind, and probably most importantly, respond very specifically to what the prospect's needs are. And so matching that up and being able to find out, okay, based upon this conversation, what are the ways that we can match up our products and services to fit those needs? I think it's really, especially for anybody in the consultative selling business, it's really made a tremendous difference in giving us an amazing tool that allows us to leverage that so much more effectively.
Yeah. How about you, Ryan? What impact have you seen?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest ones that I see that I'm obsessed with is, I mean, like for context, I always work for companies that were either capital constrained or didn't have infrastructure in place. So it allows you to really destroy that barrier and multiply the capacity of teams, multiply revenue and profit all at one time. So it gives you kind of an optiscale effect is what I focus on, where you could optimize and scale at the same time. And while doing that, you could even infuse top 1% principles into an entire sales force instantly and transform them within a couple months. So, I mean, those are some of the things that get me really excited, because I remember as a leader, as a rep, that's what slowed me down. And so I've been working with PE backed and even as big as publicly traded companies on this so that they can deploy this at scale and then really have a systematic AI-led go-to-market strategy.
Yeah, and how about automation and taking rote and routine tasks and that away from salespeople? How are you seeing that, Jonathan? How are you seeing that implemented?
It's one of the exciting things for me because I'm one of those salespeople that absolutely hates documentation. And so the ability for AI to help take things, for example, having an AI recording of a Zoom sales call or a phone call, having that automatically then analyzed, put into the CRM, creating the new contact, updating the contact, whatever the case may be, and then even based upon that conversation, scheduling our next tasks. And to have that all automated, to me, is something I so wish I had when I'd gotten started in sales, because that's always been one of my Achilles heels, is keeping track of all those details. Being an ADD sales guy, it was never easy for me to do. And so I think those automations just totally change the game for salespeople and allow them to manage candidly more opportunities and close those deals a whole lot more effectively.
Mm-hmm. And Ryan, I mean, based on that, I mean, if you're going to automate and you're going to do it, you have to make sure you've got the right processes in place, right? And you've got the right, and you're capturing data in the right way. What kind of challenges does that raise for some organizations who may not be set up for this?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge, and literally, I've been talking to CROs at companies that are in hundreds of millions and revenue a lot lately. And one of the things that they've identified is they don't know where to start, right? Because there's millions of point solutions out there now that are AI tools. And at the same time, there's the foundation models. And so I think like most people try and jump straight from A to Z instead of like putting the foundations in. And I think automations are great. I think the market is over promising some things right now. Like I'm not going to mention anyone in particular, but they've been broadcasting basically AI capabilities that haven't been available and are just becoming generally available now for the past 6 months. And so it's like the biggest thing that I would say with automations and how it becomes problematic is like know what really works versus knowing what's branding.
Right.
Or branding AI agents, I should say. Agents is the word I use on top of it. Would you agree with that, Jonathan?
I can't nod my head enough with that one, Ryan. You're so right. We're seeing, there's like everything else. There's so many promises being made. Many of those promises, when they seem too good to be true, it's because they are. They're just not there yet. There's amazing potential. In a lot of cases, I think we'll be there later this year, but we're not necessarily there. And certainly like you, I've seen some companies that for 6 months or a year have been promising things that I'm like, you can't actually do that yet.
Yeah. And let's face it, I mean, us having been around the technology industry and all of that and sales for a long time, this industry loves buzzwords, right? And you got hyper personalization is another one that's come up there. I mean, Ryan, from your point, what does hyper personalization really mean and how effective is it or how effective can it be?
Well, I mean, I don't know about you, but I get sold to, and I have a lot of people trying to sell to me. And there's two things that like make me attracted to people if they're interested. One is actually being relevant with what they're talking about to the situation I'm in and the stage that I'm at. For example, I had someone reach out to me, and this is the opposite of hyper personalization, but they're like, we work with other companies like you, like Salesforce and Zoom. And I'm like, I'm not a multi-billion-dollar company, right? So like, that's one step right there of like what not to do. And so I think with hyper personalization, how it relates to most of the B2B sellers that are probably listening or leaders is kind of looking at it, breaking it down. So like if you understand how to effectively prompt, you could do maybe 45 minutes or an hour of research in literally a minute. Okay. And you could do that and sound and act and question the prospect, whether it be through a sequence or through a first appointment, like a top 1% producer. And so when I see for hyper personalization, it's looking at if it's a big company, annual report, 10K, letter from the CEO and risk. If it's more of an SMB, it's acquisitions, logos, verticals that they're focused on, top priorities. And those are like the areas to like focus on. And then as a starting point, which are going to become table stakes soon, and then even get down to the personal level as well of what they're running into, like from a time trigger perspective of, they just started the job, not yesterday, but 3 months ago. They're finally in the phase where they can come up with error if the decision maker, and now they're going to want to make those changes. That's like a key point. So like what I would say is hitting on all those from account, individual, and then relevancy are the three core areas of hyper personalization, in my opinion.
And you mentioned something there that I think, Jonathan, this is your wheelhouse completely. As you said, this is great if you know how to prompt, right? And obviously that's one of the challenges that I think people are still struggling a lot with transitioning from doing a Google search to prompting in AI and not understanding, that it takes, you need to learn how to prompt. You need to have a strategy for prompting, right, Jonathan?
I believe so. I don't, a lot of people look for the perfect prompt. They're like, what's the best prompt I can use to be a salesman? And there isn't a single best prompt, no more than there's a single best opening line with a prospect. And I think the key is, and Ryan really said it well, if you can learn the basics of prompting and do it well, you can do that hour of research in 1 or 2 minutes, and you can be so much more effective, and you can absolutely be in that president's club and be in that 1%. But yes, you need to learn how to communicate. And it's really simple, but we tend to overcomplicate it, and then we don't get the results that we want, or we just don't maybe think of the ways that we can leverage AI in ways that can help us grow our career.
Mm-hmm. And then what about AI and deal forecasting, or focusing on the right kind of leads and bubbling those up? Because let's face it, there's a lot of time wasted in the past on focusing on the wrong leads, and a lot of companies run into problems when there's bad forecasting, right? Because that can have such knock-on effects. How can AI help with identifying the best leads and maybe helping with forecasting, Ryan?
Yeah, so and I'm making a note of this for myself because this is something that I need to talk about more. So thanks for prompting me about prompting for leads, right? So it's a little inception move there by you. So what I would say is there's two things, right? There's reactive lead scoring, and then there's proactive lead scoring. And so reactive would be inbound. So a message comes in, or I should say a lead comes in, and that could be someone from a newsletter even that you have, or through your website. And then effectively having AI assign a score based on, do they fit your ideal customer profile? Are they the right size and revenue, right decision maker? And then once they'll have the right lead score, let's say it's above 70 or higher on a 100-point scale, then what you could do is assign that to a rep, or to a, let's say if it's a solopreneur, that CEO, put the draft with the research done in their inbox, and then they could give it a once over, send it out. So that would be one that's more reactive. Proactive, I would look at it a little bit differently. I would say that's more for targeted outbound of larger enterprise companies, where you could look at, of the clients that you've acquired in the last year, which ones closed the fastest with the largest amount of deal, and then what were the weird niches that they were in, verticals and sub verticals, if you will. So that's kind of how I'd approach it, both from reactive inbound to proactive outbound, and then basically using data. And you can use a tool like 4.0. You don't have to get crazy like ChatGPT 4.0 to do this. Put a data file in there, have it analyzed, and then you can start to use that going forward. So,
yeah. Do you have anything to add to that, Jonathan?
I think, when it comes to forecasting, one of the areas that I see it having a lot of value, and I've spent a lot of time in sales management over the years, is every sales rep I've ever known is filled with what I call maybe, hope, someday. In other words, we keep things in our pipeline as a general rule longer than needs to happen. And so from a sales management perspective, I think AI brings tremendous capabilities in the fact that AI can now take the transcripts of all the phone calls and all the Zoom meetings and everything else, and we don't have to rely on the sales rep to go, no, really, there's an opportunity here. We can take a look at what the client's saying, and AI can come back and give us a realistic score on what is the likelihood that there's actually a deal here. And I think that benefits sales management tremendously, but I also think it benefits the sales rep, because we all have a tendency when we're in sales to that's part of our nature, to be optimistic and to see, there's a deal here. There's a deal here. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes we spend too much time trying to make something out of nothing. And I think AI really can be an effective tool to help at least weed out those opportunities that are never likely to turn into an end sale, and take all of that time that I believe as a sales community we spend too much on, and move that into other more proactive activities.
Yeah. I just wanted to mention a comment from our audience here from Billy Sticker, who says, 2 worlds are colliding. I know Jonathan and Ryan from 2 separate masterminds. Great people. There you go.
No, hey, Billy.
Yeah, it's a
Thanks
small virtual world. So how should leadership, particularly sales leadership, how should they approach AI? Because I talk to a lot of sales leaders, and some of them are struggling a little bit, because it's one of those situations where sometimes they don't have a strategy, but their salespeople are starting to use AI tools, and it's getting a little Wild Westy for them. So, how ideally, how should sales leaders approach AI in helping their salespeople and in implementing it in a systematic fashion, Ryan?
Yeah, I think there's a couple ways. I like, and this is the way I approach it with clients when we're rolling it out to a go-to-market team. Is like, number one is the leader actually has to like invest in themselves and use like even a large language model like you said, ChatGPT or Copilot or Gemini or Claude. It doesn't matter, but actually start and put the oxygen mask on themselves first, right? Because like this isn't a type of technology. It's not like SaaS where you're going to get the same result, works the same way every single time. There's going to be variance, like a heart monitor, if you will. So they have to like have some competency in themselves. They can't just delegate to their team. That's number one. Number two is then actually once you've done that, identify use cases that you found to be useful as a leader, and you can do this in your team meeting. And this is, like I said, if you're not leveraging an outside expert like Jonathan or myself, but if you want to do it internally or you want to just get started, do that. And then have your team share what they're using and how they're using it. And then what you could do is basically give them some free space over the next week and have them come back the following week with additional use cases, share it, have the team upvote those, start to create a prompt library. And then effectively you start to create this virtuous effect. But here's the number one thing I would say is like, you got to do this consistently over time. And it doesn't need to be every week. You could space it out more. But if you don't, your team's going to get blown away. This is happening faster than anything else ever in the history of man. It's basically like Moore's law times 3, which Moore's law is technology doubles every 18 months. Satya over at Microsoft said it's now basically technology doubling every 6 months. So that's just something that I would recommend, and that'll get people started from a leadership perspective, if that makes sense.
Yeah. What about Jonathan? How do you advise sales leaders to approach this issue?
Well, I think Ryan's absolutely right. First, I think the sales leaders themselves need to embrace it, and they need to figure out where it is in their wheelhouse where they can use it. And following up on what Ryan said, I think the other thing is it's so important to understand that they need to empower their sales team to use AI in the best possible ways. And when they do that, you know, it's one thing as a C-level or as a manager for me to save an hour a day or even, you know, a couple hours a week. That's great. But if I can take my sales team now and I can have every member on that sales team maybe save 30 to 60 minutes a day, which I think is easy to do with AI. And on top of that, handle every lead more efficiently than we've done it. Not perfectly. Notice I'm not saying perfectly, but more efficiently. Then I think we can have tremendous impact on what results we generate as a sales organization. And like Ryan said, I think now is absolutely the time to do that in 2025, because if you don't, your competition is going to be doing that, and you're going to lose because your competition is going to be able to hyper personalize responses, and they're going to be able to dig into those little nuances and spend the time focusing on the deals that are likely to happen versus the other. And that means that you're going to fall behind if you don't embrace this, both as a leadership and as your team.
So how then can leaders gauge the impact of it and make sure that they're, you know, that it's actually having a positive impact, or they're getting the return on whatever focus they're putting on AI, so that they don't end up like disappearing down rat holes, but they end up keeping it, you know, nicely measured and systematic. So Ryan, how would you advise people to do that?
It's a great question, and it's something that comes up quite a bit. So I'm glad you brought it up. I think there's really 3 ways. One is quantitatively, so that's like KPIs, right? So you could look at a metric from when you started to when you ended. So you could use like the tools in Pipeliner, right? Where you could effectively look at all the conversion rates, quantity of deals, speed to close, all those areas. From point in time before you started using it to point in time after you used it. And then you can track the improvements. That's one simple way. The second is problems. Usually there's always 1 or 2 massive constraints on every business at any given time. Use it to attack that. If you solve the problem with it, obviously you're making progress on that from an ROI perspective. And then number 3 is what I would say, and this is one that I totally did not expect to happen, but I would say that's engagement. I've never in my entire life, right? I'm not a spring chicken, seen as much engagement from people and the excitement of once their employer invests in them to learn how to use AI. And so that engagement equals EBITDA. So you got basically three legs of the stool. You got revenue with the KPIs, you got profit with the engagement, and then you have problems as the other one, which is a constraint on every business. That's the three ways that I kind of look at the efficiency.
Yeah, and by the way, I think that that's a really important point to underline because oftentimes, in the past, salespeople have been like, "Oh, you're forcing this tool on me, and this is a drag, and whatever." I mean, we've seen it with the implementation of AI in Pipeliner. The more they see, "Wow, this is fantastic because it's helping me," and you're getting the engagement and the adoption and the excitement. And let's face it, salespeople getting excited about technology is a new thing. How about you, Jonathan? How do you advise people to measure? One of the things Ryan mentioned was about setting baseline metrics, and I think this is something that a lot of organizations kind of say they do, but I don't think they really do. And I think this is probably a great time to baseline your metrics.
No doubt on the baseline. I think it's a great time to do that. So you've got a place to start. I'm probably older than most everybody else on the call. And I'm going to say that, I'm still old fashioned. At the end of the day, you track success by more sales. Are we generating more sales? And I believe that the teams that leverage AI in their sales processes are absolutely going to generate more sales than those that don't. And at the end of the day, in my experience, that's the part that's going to matter. The great news is when you do that, every sales rep gets more excited when they sell more. That's never a bad thing. And so when we're focused on that as that key tangible asset, there's a lot of other things, not to take anything away from anything Ryan said, but let's focus on the sales. If it's generating more sales for us, then something's going in the right direction. And then I think the other items are supporting that overall growth.
Mm-hmm. And then, I mean, what are some of the challenges that you've seen, or some of the maybe the missteps that people have made, Ryan? Because obviously we're very positive about this, and we all believe that this is fantastic. But have you seen anybody make any missteps or come up against challenges that could be avoided?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of ones. It's funny. I think there's two that come to mind when you ask that question. One is and I ran across this the other day. I'm not going to say who the company is, but
sure,
it was a leader, multiple hundreds of millions of revenue for an AI-powered product, and they had no AI strategy for their go-to-market team. So, how can you sell a product when your team, you have no strategy around it? And so that just blew my mind. You're like, listen, you're not eating your own dog food. Or drinking your own champagne would probably be a better way to do it, right? So I think that's one of the biggest mistakes that I see. Now, the other I would say is also thinking it's set it and forget it. Like I mentioned earlier, is hey, I checked the box. I looked into it, trained my team. They're good to go. But there's been 9 new model introductions just with OpenAI over the last 2 months. And so it's not a set and forget it thing. This is accelerating faster than anything we've ever experienced. So it needs to be ongoing, just like working out. It's not like you take a pill and you lose 50 pounds in one night, right? You had to exercise and eat well, and you got to use it on an ongoing basis. And if you will, you'd be stronger than you ever would be possible without it. And that's one of the other things I think people miss.
Yeah, no, that's a good. I love that about strategy, because I think it's Sun Tzu from The Art of War. What is it? Strategy without tactics I think it's the longest way to victory. But tactics without strategy is the noise before defeat.
I love it. I love it that you got that off the top of your head. That's a hell of a quote, man. Of course, he's got what we don't know is he's got GPT right here in his other
yeah. No, my hands free, honestly. How about you, Jonathan? What are some of the obstacles or missteps that you've seen people make?
I think the biggest one I've seen, and I have to wholeheartedly agree with Ryan's second point. I think that was spot on. But the one I see most commonly is that sales leaders, and especially the C-level executives, they look at AI as, can I get rid of these annoying salespeople? I can get rid of them. And it's not possible, or if it's possible, it's certainly not recommended. The salespeople are needed. The sales expertise is needed. AI amplifies skill and experience. It doesn't replace that. And so the biggest mistake I see making is that many of the discussions with the C-suite start at, great, how do we get rid of our sales force? And that's not the answer when it comes to AI and sales in my mind. In fact, that's probably the worst thing that you could do in many cases.
Yeah. What do you think, Ryan, salespeople should do though to somewhat inoculate themselves against that? Because I mean, I think there is going to be some replacement of some levels of roles by AI. But how would you advise salespeople if you want to be successful and to thrive in the AI era? What should you be doing?
It's a good question. It's a question I posed to myself 2.5 years ago when ChatGPT came out, because like I looked at it and I'm like, remember the phase where they were going through on LinkedIn and everybody's like, I'm going to test it versus my job and see if it could do what I do. Right. And that was like big for a while. Like, oh, it can't replace me. It sucks. Right. Like that was with like GPT 3.5. So at that point in time, I'm like, all right, I'm going to test it. That took me like 10 years to figure out. And so it got me like 90% of the way there in 3 questions. So I was like, holy cow. So I'm like, I could do one of 2 things. I could either be an ostrich and bury my head in the sand and ignore it. I could get run over, or I could run towards it and basically just try and ingest it and help people as much as possible and use it whenever I can. And that's been like kind of my underlying principles of using it like for the last 2.5 years. And that's what I would say is the best thing you could do to future-proof yourself, because this is happening, like I said, so fast that there are always going to need to be experts who know how to use it and transform the speed of the technology and the speed of implementation. If you could do that, your role can evolve to probably levels you've never seen before. So that's my 2 cents on it.
Yeah. And how about you, Jonathan? How would you advise people to either inoculate themselves or to actually raise themselves up?
Well, and I agree with Ryan entirely on this. I think that this is a tremendous opportunity for AI or for salespeople to actually embrace the technology, become proficient at using it. And ironically, it's probably a greater benefit for the seasoned sales professional than it is for the new one. And the reason I believe that is because I do really believe that AI amplifies skill and experience. And so if you as a experienced salesperson, whether you're 30, 40, 50, 60, it doesn't matter, can learn to leverage AI to do your job better, to take the skill and experience that you've had and leverage that, you will be worth far more to any employer than what you were just a year ago. But the key is, like Ryan said, you can't be an ostrich and stick your head in the sand and assume it's going to go away. You can't just assume that, you know what, all the things that I've been doing for the last 20 years are going to continue to serve me successfully, because it's going to be a dwindling return if you don't start embracing AI as part of that.
Yeah, and in the last couple of minutes, well, Jonathan's already got his hat on, but Ryan, put on your futurist hat and tell us, where do you think this is going? What's coming next?
Yeah, so I mentioned earlier that AI agents aren't all the way there as of right now. However, like deep research, for example, by OpenAI is there, and it's amazing. And I actually had a CRO say, Ryan, this would have cost me $50,000 to create, or basically hire Gartner or somebody else to produce for me. And you showed me how to do it in 10 minutes for free, basically. So I think the number one thing I would look at is like start with the foundation of prompting and understand how to get really good outputs. That's 1. 2 is start to look at more of a process mindset in terms of how you could create GPTs or assistants. And then agents are going to be coming out on a wider, more depth and breadth later this year. And they're going to accelerate next year. If you do those first 2 things, you'll be ready for step 3, which is coming, and you will blow by everybody else if you do that. So that's my recommendation.
And how about you? We'll pretend that it says your hat says Futuro instead of La Paz. And by the way, in all disclosure, I interviewed Jonathan a number of weeks ago, and I've been using your prompting model. So thank you for that. It's absolutely been fantastic. So where do you see the future?
Well, let me begin by I think my crystal ball is probably cracked and cloudy, but I do believe that we're going to continue to see just advancements that are going to make our heads spin. I think, that Ryan, you talked earlier about Moore's Law, and it used to be technology doubles every 18 months. I think in the AI world, we're going to start seeing that approach a 90-day mark, that we're going to see the doubling of capabilities every 90 days. And I think we're going to likely be there by the end of this year. So just hang on, understand that that's going to happen, and be open to finding ways that you can leverage AI as a salesperson, as a sales manager, that again amplify your skill and experience, not to replace you as the relationship builder and as the conduit, but that take all of these ancillary tasks that we're doing and do that for us. Ryan talked about agents, and agents we're going to see so much growth in this year. I know that. Imagine the ability that you could have an agent that looked ahead on your calendar and identified your new appointments, and actually, based on what you want done, created reports for you that you could summarize in maybe 2 to 3 minutes before you hop on that call, so that you're prepared and ready to go. Reports on your prospect, on the company, and everything else. That is absolutely going to be here, and we're going to be there by the end of the year, I believe.
All right, fantastic. Listen, I know, Ryan, you have to jump to another engagement. Jonathan, thank you so much. Thank you, Ryan. This has been fantastic. Thank you all for joining us. The chat's been on fire. There's so much great content, and obviously this will be available afterwards for those who couldn't make it. So see you all again soon for another AI Sales Insider episode. Thank you. And